Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description. Hello everybody, the Ford Mustang is an automotive icon, a legend on four wheels, and on paper I should love it, for it combines classic GT proportions with a big, naturally aspirated V8 engine, typically a manual gearbox, sending drive to the rear wheels, all in a package that's priced to be affordable to the everyman. This is the blue-collar hero of America, and arguably the car that more than any other us Europeans associate with our friends across the pond. The reality, though, is that almost every single Mustang I've ever driven has been a disappointment. They are a dynamic disaster with a mismatching control weights, a chassis that doesn't really seem to know what it wants to do, and a car that really feels at odds with itself. And please don't take this for a Brit simply hating on American stuff just because it's fashionable. I love the Corvette. I would own one. I enjoyed driving the Camaro perhaps even more. I've driven Dodges, the Viper, the Challenger. They're cool cars. America has built so much awesome stuff. But when it comes to this, it just seems to be a near constant misfire. And I've driven Mustangs spanning over 50 years of its production. But a couple of years ago, they brought out a new one, and when I got to try it last year in convertible manual guise, though there were things I didn't like in terms of the drive, I thought it might have been the best Mustang yet. And today I'm driving the more hardcore Dark Horse. But is it really that good? Or simply a badging exercise for an angry pony that no longer has a place in the world? Well, find out in today's episode of JayEmm on Cars. What's really curious about this new generation of Mustang, codename S650, is that here in Britain you'd be forgiven for not realising there even was a new Mustang. See, when the last one, the S550, came out, it went wild here. It likely helped that it was the first time Ford had ever sold a Mustang here in a right-hand drive guise. Before you could still buy them, it'd just be a left hooker, and that does put a lot of people off. The S550, though, they changed that, and to great success. The Mustang was here, and in style. After decades of waiting, British Mustang fans turned out in their droves. It also helped that the S550 was a real step forward for the car. This time round, though, well, people don't really seem to be that into it. In fact, I myself hadn't really noticed there was a new Mustang until I started seeing odd-looking ones around, thinking, what on earth is that? Naturally, the internet is somewhat obsessed with this car's hardcore variant, the GTD. That's a wild wings and aero race car for the road. This, the Dark Horse, instead, is more a slightly sporting variant of the regular car. In Porsche parlance, think of this as Mustang S. And so, what do you get with the Dark Horse? Well, slightly more aggressive styling. You also get a better exhaust, more power from the engine too, though sadly here in Europe, nowhere near as much as in America, where the base model has 480 horsepower and the Dark Horse 510. Here, both of them have just about 450, separated only by a handful of horses. And, as ever here in Europe, we are denied some of the Mustang's tastier options, including here the Track Pack. You would have thought, though, for your 70-odd thousand pounds, they could at least have given you a wireless phone charger. Nope, someone somewhere at Ford decided to take that away. So this one
is aftermarket.
Should you go for the 6-speed manual, you also get an entirely different box. In the GT, it's built by Getrag, and in the Dark Horse, it's by Tremec. It comes with different ratios and a 3D printed titanium shift knob. This one comes with the 10-speed automatic, which is then shared between the models. It was chosen because its owner, the lovely Dave, had an accident a few years ago, and so to drive a manual for any distance is no longer really possible for him. Previously, he had a BMW iX3, and before that, an M550i. When I asked him what it was that persuaded him to go for a Mustang, having never had one before and coming out of a series of BMWs, he said, well, it was simple. I got divorced and I got bored of BMWs, so he figured time to buy something properly exciting. He's had this now since the beginning of the year, and he's loved every mile in it. And I have to say, in the flesh, I think this is a far more successful affair than the convertible I drove last year. Now, that's partly due to the fact I think convertible Mustangs never quite look right. The coupe, for me, is the shape of a Mustang. I feel the same way about the Jaguar XK, Jaguar E-Type, and a variety of other cars, 911, so on and so forth. The extra aero of the Dark Horse, including the wing at the back, also helps hide a few of the odd design decisions they made with the 7th generation of the Mustang, and in this grey paintwork, it does look mean.
Last year I started the Radiator Arms Track Club. Now we're expanding and changing the name. The new Friendly Faces Car Club is a hub for car events done right. We offer a full calendar of track events, skid pan days, social meets and more. The emphasis is on fun, making new friends and sharing a love of cars. Check out our upcoming events such as our Porsche and Classic Car Track Days on friendlyfacescarclub.com.
This car was taken from stock, and there aren't really all that many options to choose from. They include a couple of different treatments for the interior, about 10 different colours for the exterior, the Recaro bucket seats, which he calls a £2,000 downgrade on account of the fact they aren't as soft and comfortable as these, nor do they have the heating and ventilation, which I'm honestly very, very grateful for today. As you can probably tell, it's a bit warm outside. Oh, and the ventilation does work very well. I spent this morning in an old 1960s car with no aircon and black vinyl seats. That was sticky. In classic Ford tradition, the interior's hardly luxurious, but it's got what you need. So you've got buttons on the steering wheel, you've got physical controls for some stuff down here, though sadly not your HVAC, that's on the screen, and the rest of it's not quite as good as you might hope for a car costing now £73,000. That's a lot, isn't it? And that's a problem, because you see, that puts it into the firing line of some very serious kit. For this money, you could basically have a BMW M2. But the thing is, I drove a BMW M2, and I didn't really like it that much. That might mean this car has arrived at exactly the right time, because, be prepared internet, if this is really as good as Ford claim, I might be about to tell you that a Ford Mustang is better than a BMW. Is it though? Well, to find out, I'm going to put the gearbox into manual mode, the exhaust into loud, and have a bit of fun. Well, we're certainly off to a good start. See, one of the big problems I had with the GT when I drove it, well, it just didn't sound like a Mustang anymore. And I know, there are lots and lots of regulations that Ford and everybody else now have to deal with. But this one, though, they seem to have cracked it. Now, the mode I've got this exhaust in, it says racetrack use only. But I'm sure that's a guideline rather than an actual rule. What about the rest of the car though? Well, even with 450 horsepower, the performance just doesn't feel quite as visceral as you'd like it. And that might be because this car is something of a heifer. See, with this 10-speed auto, which in of itself adds around 70 kilos to the package, the car tips the scales at over 1.8 tons. That's a lot. Even with a fairly generous torque figure of 397 pounds-feet, it just doesn't really seem to have the get up and go that you'd want it to. And you'd think, with 10 speeds in that gearbox, they'd be stacked fairly close together, and the first ones would be fairly short. But it doesn't really feel that way either. I think what I need to do is turn around, get myself a clear bit of road, and put the car in one of its sportier modes. Now you've got a few different options to choose from here, and you'll see them all on this screen, powered by Unreal Engine, including a custom one, and you can have 6 different custom settings, though only one available at a time. The way they do the custom options though is a bit daft, but beyond that you've got normal, sport, track, drag strip, and slippery roads. Let's go for sport, shall we? On the road, in theory, that should be right. Now this is going to sharpen up the throttle response. It would also change the exhaust. It's changed it to sport. I'm going to put it back to track. Allegedly the gearbox will be a bit sharper too. The traction control might be altered, I'm not certain, and the dampers will be firmed up. In the GT, the mag ride dampers are something like a £1,700 option. In the Dark Horse, they are standard and also come with bespoke tuning. Oh, definitely a sharper gear shift, more of a punch in the back. That's a bit more like it. Right, do you know what? Conditions are fantastic out there, so for just a moment, and for science, I'm going to try track. Now here it tells me that traction control is off, so I'm going to assume it's completely off. Luckily, with 255 wide front tyres, 275 wide rears, and it being 26 degrees out there, which in Fahrenheit is about, I think, 160, I think grip levels are going to be okay. Obviously, I'll try not to be a typical Mustang driver, but let's see what happens. The suspension, I think, is firmed up again. The gear shift just isn't quite as visceral as I'd like. Let's get it up in the rev range, see what happens. Yeah, doesn't have that snap of a DCT, or even, to be honest, an 8-speed ZF in a BMW, an Alfa Romeo, or a Maserati. But it does respond well enough. It's really weird. It gives you a little hit in the back, but it's very smoothly delivered. A bit like a giant car-sized massage function. However, track just doesn't really seem to be bringing me any benefit, so I'm going to go back to sport. The handbrake down here, by the way, is an electronic one, and it can effectively be used as a drift brake. Get to the top end of the rev range, car pulls nicely, and you know what? Once you get dialed into it, the performance is okay, but the gearbox is just not great. Yeah, it's weird. Either it's very smooth and a bit uninvolving, or it seems to be a little bit delayed and then gives you a very, very unpleasant shift. I'd heard before the 10-speed box was supposed to be really good, but I don't think it is. The rest of the car, though, I'm quite gelling with. Sports car, it is not. The steering is on the light side, there's a tiny bit of texture and feel coming through it, but even in its firmer damper settings, you've still got a little bit of roll in the body, bit of movement, but I like that. It's kind of old school, more muscle car feeling. Sadly, it's when you do start to try and push on that things become a little bit less pleasant. Get it into a tight little switchback and the front wash is a little wide. Then, when you try and use the rear to bring things into line, it does feel like that wants to overtake the rest of the car. Dynamically, the Mustang still has a way to go. If this engine had low-down torque, I think you'd get in a lot of trouble. However, I will at least give it credit for communicating that sort of thing to you. You do feel involved in the process, and it is nice to drive a car where you feel like you can get somewhere close to its limits on the road. Right, has everybody got a JQ now? I'm sure they give you lots for your money and everything, but like, I blinked, and all of a sudden, Everyone's got one, everywhere, and none of them can drive. 34 mile an hour. 34 mile an hour they're doing in a 60. In more good news, if you want to turn off the now mandatory ADAS, it's fairly simple. A couple of button presses on the wheel and it's done. Thank you, Ford. And it would appear Ford are more than aware of the fact they're struggling to sell these, because if you want to buy it through a Ford dealer and do finance, they're offering some very, very aggressive deals, including 0%. And it's been a little while since I've seen that. Someone once told me, if you want to know if a manufacturer is struggling to sell a car, just look for the 0% finance deal. Once upon a time, they were very common because manufacturers could afford to do that. Now, less so. And the Blue Oval is struggling. And I can't help but think, couldn't they have built a version of this on a cut-down chassis with a slightly smaller engine and called it Capri? Ford. It is big, takes up a lot of road, and although you can see much of that bonnet, placing the corners is not the easiest. You've got a reversing camera and rear parking sensors, but not front, which honestly, you could use. Oh, that seat ventilation though, that is very, very nice. Tell you what isn't, it's when you go over a pothole in this thing. Apparently it has something called pothole mitigation. What that means, we're not entirely sure, but while I was out with Dave earlier, we did hit a pothole, wasn't even a very big one, and oh my word, the shock through the chassis was a bit nauseating. Do like the sounds it makes. I do like that. It's like around town. I have to say, it's nice and quiet in here. That's a very good thing. You could definitely cruise in this car. And Dave has said he's the sort of man that typically changes his cars very, very frequently, but this one he can see taking him into retirement and beyond. The brakes, I really don't like. I appreciate the fact that this morning I was driving a car which is near 6 decades this car's senior, and so sometimes there's a period of acclimatization. But the fact is, these are just too sensitive. It makes that fine control when you're approaching a junction, that sort of thing, a little bit more difficult than it really should be. Has a nice noise. I can live with that. That is acceptable. And you know what, in so many ways, the fact this car just exists at all for sale here, it makes me very happy. Oh, and the exhaust had slipped back into sport mode. Oh yeah, you can hear a difference. There's a quiet mode, and quiet mode is very, very quiet. In fact, let's just test that for a little bit, you know, for science and all that. In fact, surprisingly, Dave has his custom mode set with the exhaust in quiet. Oh yeah, very muted. You still hear it though. Then let's contrast that with track. I mean, it's not night and day, but there is certainly a difference. The car does have auto start-stop, though it doesn't really tend to do much very often. After 150 miles driving this morning to get to me, it still wouldn't activate. He also said he did nearly write this car off on its second day. These Pirellis the car comes with, they're not very good in the wet. All the other Mustangs I've driven, the main reason I think you buy these cars is they look and they sound cool. I'm about to upset a lot of people here with this one, but one common thing I found with nearly all American cars, and often Americans, they're really obsessed with numbers. But they're not so obsessed with truth. They love looking at differential stats, final drives, temperatures, compression ratios, all sorts of things. They go really, really analytical. But when it comes to the experience, these things just, well, they don't deliver. Half the time, it's like a cake in Las Vegas. If you've ever been there, you know what I mean. There's all these celebrity-owned bakeries and things around the place building the most incredible-looking stuff. I mean, this thing looks like sci-fi stuff, right? But it's food. You put it in your face. The truth is, though, it's full of chemicals, and it tastes like old bumholes rolled in dust. It's just not nice. European stuff, meanwhile, well, maybe it's not the nicest to look at, but it's the real deal. It's got flavours. Look at the Californian strawberry. It's beautiful, it's huge, it's magnificent, glowing red. But it's tasteless. And every other Mustang for me has been a bit like that. It's just been a car that looks cool, sounds cool, but as soon as you get in it, that illusion is shattered. It's not a nice experience. This seems to change that a bit. I like this car quite a bit. I'd love to see what it's like with the manual, because I think that could be the one thing this is really missing. And you know what? This or a BMW M2, M4, it's not even a difficult decision. I'd have the Ford. Sure, it's made out of recycled dustbins in here, and some of your friends will mock you. It is a car of cliches. It's a tin of Ronsil, wears its heart on its sleeve, meat and potatoes motoring, good honest fun, etc, etc, etc. But you know what? In 2026, we could use a bit more of that. I like this car. Thanks for bringing it down, Dave. And thanks to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.